Veda Matra Pramudaha Kilaham. Kali Bol Rama Krishna Kali Bol.
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 Kali Bol Rama Krishna Kali Bol Rama Krishna Kali Bol Rama Krishna Kali Bol.
Kali Bol Rama Krishna Kali Bol Rama Krishna Kali Bol Rama Krishna Kali Bol.
Kali Bol Mahadevi Kali Bol Mahamaya Kali Bol Mahashakti Kali Bol.
Kali Bol.
Om Sahana. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavo Vahai Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvesho Vahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, the reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. And we return to the subject of Shakta-Advaita-Vada in accord with this new chart that has been created that shows the many, many aspects of Divine Mother. This is just, of course, one artist's rendition of a particular aspect of the goddess, but it was free enough of arms and various weapons that it gave me lots of space to be able to fill things in. And it occurs to me that, and somebody even mentioned it at the break, could we just have a grand tour through it before we start specifying? So I will do that for you now. You can see, of course, at the top, Brahman, which we looked at. That's the absolute reality, nameless, formless. And on either side of her head, there with the half moon, which is also symbolic of growing wisdom, the waxing moon, are the two main bijams of divine power. Om, which is really the seed syllable for Brahman, and Hrim, which is the seed syllable for Shakti. There are other bijams of power, of course, that are there in the tradition, but those two specifically match Brahman and Shakti, the static and dynamic reality. We'll look at those. I have a chart for each of those, several actually. Now, as you move to the left and to the right, you see the two types of samadhi in Vedanta, called nirvikalpa and savikalpa. And if you wanted those equivalents for those in yoga, that would be asampragyata, seedless samadhi, and sampragyata, seeded samadhi. And we can look at that again through a chart in the Patanjali yoga system that has these seeded samadhis broken into 4 and 8 subdivisions. So the seeded samadhis are many, but the nirvikalpa, or the seedless samadhi, is just one. That's the highest state of consciousness according to the tradition. It would be synonymous with Brahman. And we looked at some of the levels of higher knowledge needed and required for the Brahman state. Now, on the pillars themselves, you see Nirguna and Saguna. Nirguna on this side along with Nirvikalpa, and Saguna on this side along with Savikalpa. Nir means, of course, without or made extinct, and Sa means with or added to. So in the case of Nirguna and Saguna, it's a way of explaining divine reality with qualities and without qualities. So I have a chart that shows, several charts that show that very well, we can look at as well. The gunas here are more than just the 3 gunas we mentioned at the beginning of the class. That is, Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva are the 3 gunas. So when the gunas break out of equilibrium into disequilibrium, then the creation's world of name and form began to effloresce, and vibration gets denser and denser, and they're all the way down to this world of 5 elements, which is densely vibrating. And then when it transcends the gunas, goes into a nirguna state, that would be, of course, the formless state again. So nirguna and saguna are probably a more ancient way of saying nirvikalpa and savikalpa, because there were ways of explaining Brahman that totally denied the world. India's Buddhism, for instance, and others, some systems of those Vedanta, of the Vedas, the Vedanta and Buddhism have been known to actually just deny the world outright as an illusion. So the ancient rishis weren't thinking that way. They were thinking more in terms of when it took on attributes and when it gave them up. The most important thing about that is that in the taking on of gunas and the shedding of gunas, nothing happens to Brahman. It remains the same and unaffected. Sri Ramakrishna used to use simple stories to describe that. Good and bad smells pass on the air, but the air only carries them, and it's not affected by them. So that was one way he said about Brahman taking on attributes and giving up attributes and nothing happening to it in that process. It's really a fancy way of saying that philosophically would be parinama and aparinama, transformation and non-transformation. That all transformation is really not happening, it only appears to be. And Brahman is ever transformationless. So if you're looking for truth and for reality, then anything that changes will belie itself. It will betray itself to be not Brahman. And so you're looking for the specific non-dual state. It'll have to be changeless. And of course you'll find it to be nameless and formless too. So some interesting way the rishis thought about it, they would assign, when it took on name and form, they just call it saguna. Oh, that's Brahman with attributes. And when it had no name and form, they said, oh, that's nirguna, Brahman without attributes. And it was a very sweet way, really, of getting around the problem of emptiness and voidism and nihilism and so forth that could creep in there. Now, down the same pillar, Astika and Nastika, I mentioned that. Astika is the 6 orthodox systems of India, like Vedanta and Yoga and Samkhya and so forth. I'll show you a chart on that next week. And Nastika are the unorthodox systems, like Buddhism and Jainism. The only difference is that the Astika takes probably 2 considerations. One, that Astika always accepts the existence of God. Nastika quite often doesn't. Or if it does, it doesn't want to talk about it, whether it exists or not. It's non-committal. And the other thing about Astika and Nastika is that Astika places its authority on the Vedas. It always takes the Vedas for its authority. Nastika doesn't have to. Nastika can drift away into other forms of, like the Eightfold Path and the Four Noble Truths of Buddhism and so forth. So it doesn't necessarily follow the Vedas to the T. So it's very not only interesting, but very important to know the difference between the Astika and Nastika systems. So those are both belonging to her, is the idea here on this chart, is that all systems of philosophy are found in her. They cannot reveal her, one song says in India. She reveals them. So all systems of philosophy exist in her. We'll have a good time looking into that at another class. What I mentioned here are the 2 lamps, the 2 ghee wick lamps. Brahmagyana is one of them, and Prema Bhakti is the other. So again, according to temperament, Brahmagyana is usually for the non-dualists, quite often for those who are gyanis, who are following the knowledge path, the practicing tapas, austerity, renunciation. That kind of soul is attracted to Brahmagyan and usually attains Brahmagyan. This kind of soul is ecstatic, lover of God, quite often does rituals, practices chanting, singing, and engages in forms of bhakti or devotion to the Lord, sacrifice, yagyas, which is also down here. So many of the bhakti path also attracted to God with form. That's where Ishvara would come in, or Ishvari. We talk about her as the Supreme Ishvari. Quite often we sing about her as Supreme Ishvari too, if you remember this beautiful offering. Tvam me brahma sanatani ma Sharada Ishvari subhage ma Brahmananda Swarupini ma Brahma Shakti Sukadayini ma Sachit Sukhamaya Rupini ma Shristi Stiti Laya Karini ma Brahma Sudambuni Kelini ma Brahma Advaikya Sukham Kari ma Jiveshvara Bit Kautuki ma Agada Lila Rupini ma Tvam me brahma sanatani ma Sharada Ishvari subhage ma. So, about 10 verses of the 108 verses to Ishvari, Divine Mother of the Universe, that we sing once a year. O Mother, you are the subtle essence of supreme bliss. Through compassion you grant happiness. You are the Lord's inherent power, called Shakti. You are the embodiment of existence, knowledge, and bliss absolute. You manifest the appearance of duality through creation, preservation, and dissolution. Bliss flows everywhere as the nectar of your divine sport. The mystery of the union of Atman and Brahman is revealed by thee, and the illusion of separation between Jiva and Ishvara is also thy play. The meaning of your divine sport is beyond comprehension, O Holy Mother. Basically the simple English to those 8 verses. So in 108 verses they go on and on like that, singing about Ishvari, Ishvari. So that's this Divine Mother as the supreme form of the universe. The formless form, sometimes they call her, because she is so hard to apprehend. So Brahmagyana and Prema Bhakti, those 2 lamps, Sri Ramakrishna used to say, to the non-dualists she gives Brahmagyana, to the ecstatic lover she gives Prema Bhakti, but to those who she wants to make teachers of men she gives both, because they have to know both about Brahmagyana and Prema Bhakti. These actual flames were fun to play with. Under the Brahmagyana side I put Advaita Vedanta, that is the non-dual philosophy of India, that is the thread that runs through all the jewels. And Vichara, the art of inquiry into the nature of reality. That's what we were doing this morning, for instance, on our live streaming satsang, when 4 or 5 people sent in questions and I was answering them, reading them and answering them. That's kind of an Atma Vichara that allows for question and answer inside of the realm of Atmagyan. That's one of these important facets, right? Antahagyan, to find out the inner wisdom lying within you and to connect with it and be able to use it to not only just to solve problems and to destroy suffering, eliminate your pain, but also to pass on the wisdom to others. Here, the candle wicks on the Prema Bhakti side are Ishvara and Avatar. And we looked into Ishvara, and I just sang a little bit about Ishvari, the female form of that. And then Avatar, of course, meaning that supreme soul that comes every age. From age to age I embody myself forth. for the resurrection of the Dharma and for the destruction of the old Dharma. As Krishna says in the Gita, one of the best examples of avatar. Up here on this pillar is Kaivalya on this side, which means penultimate realization. That is, divorcing yourself from form before you get into formless state. And over here is moksha, I think, or mukti. They're both the same, basically the same Sanskrit word and root. It means a spiritual freedom which is always at hand. If you say emancipation, then sort of infers that you were once bound and then you got free. But moksha is not like that. It's a freedom that's always at hand, and you only fall out of it and then return to it, fall out of it, return to it. And the falling and the returning is all also non-actual. There's never a time when you're ever bereft of your freedom. You only dream yourself away from it. Sometimes they use that description. But it's always there as the foundation of your being. So next week, look to see those on this version too. As we come down the middle here, we see these two jewels, Viveka and Vairagya, because they are treasures or jewels in the Vedantic way of thinking. Down here you have Shatsampat, that means the 6 jewels. So Viveka and Vairagya are 2 of those. Shatsampati is the 3rd treasure of the 4 treasures of Vedanta. First treasure is Viveka, second treasure is Vairagya, and then the Satsampat is Samo, Dhammo, Upuiti, Titiksha, Samadhana, and Shraddha. That means inner peace, self-control, forbearance, contentment, a special type of concentration, samadhana, that allows you to concentrate on God and nothing else, and Shraddha, faith. I think Shraddha is also pulled out. No, that's Sharanagata. So Shatsampat is the 3rd of the 4 treasures, and the 4th is called Mumukshutvam, a real, true desire to be free. That's how rare a real, true desire to be free is for the human being. They usually want to be bound. They have bound themselves up very nicely, by the way, in this cage of bones and flesh, and they think they are the cage of bones and flesh. So that's how easily they get bound, how tractable they are, how easily led into Maya. But the desire to get free rarely occurs to the soul. They asked Shankara what's one of the most unfortunate things you've ever seen. He said that's it. That people think they're the body and that they'll never die at the same time. So those 2 jewels, Viveka is discrimination between the real and the unreal. Vairagya is detachment from the unreal. Any Vedantic circle you go into, probably the first thing you hear. Which is why we have our Swamis named Vivekananda, because that's how important that first treasure is. So Viveka, Vairagya, Shatsampat are very much connected, but these are very high jewels in the Vedantic fold. And then there at her 3rd eye, Ekagra, that's the state of mind that is called single-minded. There are 5 states of mind, and one is scattered, and one is called dull. One is called sometimes concentrated, sometimes unconcentrated, back and forth. And the 4th is called one-pointed, ekagra, and the 5th is called no mind, niruddha. So that's a 5-mind classification in yoga Patanjali gave us, father of yoga. So ekagra is fixed right there at her 3rd eye. She's always got that single-pointed vision, what Krishna called the Gyanachakshu, the wisdom eye, or Christ called, if thine eye be single, you shall know the truth. Now, here, before we go on to her arms in the middle, you see a parinama on one side and a jativada on the other. I mentioned both of those in the first half early on. A parinama means non-transformation. That's one of her great spiritual axioms. It's that transformation never takes place. It only appears to. Nothing ever changes. There's only one reality, And you know it's reality because it doesn't change. And anything that changes then would have to be classified here in Maya. But even there in Maya, it only appears to change. Like, say, an atomic particle or a subatomic particle changing at a billionth of a second. How can you say that's changing? How can you not say it's not changing? It's all happening so quick is the point. It's Mayic. It's incomprehensible. Like, how can you count all the waves on the surface of a windy ocean? Thousands rising up all the time. Can you point one out and say, oh, it was born, it died? Before you even say it was already there and gone, you see. So the idea of a parinama means that no matter what appearances might dictate otherwise, the real fact of the matter is that there's one reality and it's changeless. So everything that's apparent, that's going through change, is not Brahman either, or it's not actually going through any change at all. It just seems to. So that's one of the non-dual axioms that you have to ponder in Advaita Vedanta to make yourself fit for understanding or experiencing, better yet, the non-dual state. The other one is Ajati-Vada, and that's the one Krishna handed out to Arjuna on the battlefield in the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, when he was talking about his birthless, deathless nature, Ajati. That's what we always like to sing as far as Shankara is concerned too. Namrichor na Shankar, Name Jati Beda, Pita Naiva Me Naiva, Mata Majan Maha, Chirananda Rupa, Shivoham, Shivoham. So, Namrityur Nashanka, I have no death, Mrityur, because I was never born. Shanka, Namrityur Nashanka. Name Jati Beda, I never had a birth. See, Jati, Ajati. I never had a birth. That's the path I follow. Vada. I know that I was never born and I never die. So that's the other one of the great two pillars of Advaita Vedanta that non-dualism is based upon in India. If it changes or if it doesn't change, and if it's born or if it isn't born, you see, those are the kinds of things you have to ponder. Those are the ultimate dualities. If you're still playing around or suffering with pleasure and pain, then you're at a very low level of duality. Virtue and vice, even worse. A little higher but more flummoxing, you see. But if you get to the dual and the non-dual, or form and formlessness, or bondage and liberation, or change and non-change, then you're talking about very, very subtle levels of duality, which are very healthy for the soul to meditate upon. Those will get to the root of its problems. That it will get to the root of its main problem. There's one big bubble that's the main problem, and a lot of little bubbles are attached to it. If you can pierce that main bubble, those others will disperse, you see. But most people's way of working at it is to pierce a little bubble at a time and try and get to perfection, you see. But encountering that one main bubble, you'd say that that one main bubble of a problem, a samskara, an impression, a negativity inside of you, is best dealt with by meditating on form and formlessness, and on birthlessness and deathlessness. In the tradition of vichara, right? And that's the light that you're shining on it for the seeker. You have to engage in those kinds of things. So those are two very important inner pillars. And so there's outer pillar, inner pillar. You can tell I had a lot of fun with this. Now, there's the parrot. She's holding in her upper right-hand arm, which I thought about and said, yes, of course, that's the Jivatman. It's an interesting teaching in India. There's the Jiva, there's the Jiva Koti, there's the Jivatman, and then there's the Paramatman that we looked at. These are all sort of different levels of embodied soul, but the difference isn't really in them, the difference is just in their realization. They're all the Paramatman, but some of them are still at the level of the jiva. Oh, I think I'm an embodied being, see, and they're falling completely under that misconception. I am an embodied being, end of story. But a jiva koti, you might say, begins to see that there's a casing here, you know, and I'm an essence inside a casing, and they begin to have some sort of suspecting. You see, the game's afoot. You see, and they begin to start to trace the truth, and they have an inkling of something deeper. So when it gets time to Jivatman, he's beginning to say, well, I haven't realized the Atman yet, but I know the Atman is in me. I am the Jivatman. I'm the embodied true soul. And you can't take that away from me. I've come that far, you see. So there's no talking a person like that out of that level of understanding. I am the Atman. Even if I haven't realized it yet. Ha ha, nah, nah. You see. So I defy you to take that away from me, you see. So there's more to come, and of course that would be when this Jivatman flies up to join the Atman. Oh, on the new chart here, Atman is right here across the top of her crown, the band of her crown. So that's on the new version too. That will be there next week, I hope. So Jivatman is there. Now her four arms are very important. Ichya, Kriya, Jnana, and Dravya. Those are the four sub-shaktis of Mahashakti. Here's Mahashakti herself. And then there's these four sub-shaktis, they call. And Ichya is will. So that upper right-hand arm of hers is willpower, her supreme will. There are beautiful songs about it. I'd have to look it up, but it's Shakale Tomari Ichya is the name of the song. It means, "O Mother, all happens by thy own sweet will." You cause the elephant to get caught in the mire, but cause the lame man to scale the highest mountain. That's kind of lyrics, you see, contradiction-like lyrics that show her supreme will and everything, how she can make the impossible possible, in other words. So that's one of her arms. And this arm is Kriya, means spontaneous action. Everything that she does in the universe is for the highest good, even if it seems otherwise, and it's immediately spontaneous. It's so swift that none can see it happening. We know faster than speed of sound is the speed of light, and faster than the speed of light is the speed of thought. But much faster than the speed of the highest thinker is her kriya, her action. Her decision and action take place in the same instant and are initiated in that same instant. So she passes down the decrees from on high, from her own intelligence, and puts them into actuation in a split second kind of idea. See, there are many. That has to do with her intelligence. That's her jnanam. So these arms are not at all disassociated with each other. They work in tandem to bring about the highest effects. So yes, jnanam is her wisdom, and dravya is her ability to produce substances. Now for that we'd have to look over here into pramana, and we'd have to look at the panchakarna down here. Panchakarna is the way she produces things in fives. 5 elements, 5 senses, 5-fold mind, 5 parts of Maya. I mean, everything from the very highest to the very lowest is a quintuplication process. And so panchakarna becomes an extremely important, let's call it linchpin, in this great wheel of Mahashakti that makes it turn, as she makes it turn, we should say. And so we'll look at the panchakarna with a new chart, and we'll also look at the 6 proofs of truth and pramana probably next week. Very revealing into that idea of producing substances, how she plays one off the other, how in the mind of Lord Brahma, the creator god, Brahma is right there, and there's Vishnu, and there's Shiva, and the trikona is pointed down, so everything that's coming down from her feet, Devi Padam, as a sacrifice, is going down into unmanifested and manifested prakriti, things are beginning to get rife with objects and actions and karmas, and it's getting thick. It's a thicket. It's a great thicket of Maya is beginning to form from there on down. But Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva are sort of at the head of that as the initiatory powers, the trinity they're called. So this four arms then of her design, Icha, Kriya, Jnana, and Dravya, are very important to take into consideration how she makes things manifest. And so I was saying, in the mind of Lord Brahma, there's this idea of liquidity, and it's going to have to go through a set of several different 5 manifestations in order for that to become water, the element of water. See, and it'll have to pass through the idea of flow, and like water can be used in many different ways. It's ice, it's gas, and it's liquid, right? So you take water and it's got 3 forms right there. It's solid, means tamas. It's liquid, means rajas, flowing, fast. And then it's sattva, air, vapor. So the way she causes things to happen through triputis and quintuplications is a huge part of all the philosophies of India. The ones that don't concentrate on it, the only reason they don't is because it was already done by Samkhya. And the earliest Nyaya and Sankhya already did the quintuplication process and had scriptures about them and had great souls that discoursed on them. So when the seers of a later period saw that, said, marvelous, our work's already done for us. Now all we have to do is explain consciousness. Good luck. Hard enough to explain the panchakarna process. These sets of 5s that just trickle down, you see. Like, for instance, you have 5 causal senses somewhere in your dream state, and then they become 5 dream senses, and you're smelling in a dream, and hearing in a dream, and touching in a dream, and then in the waking state it become 5 knowledge senses, seeing, tasting, touching, hearing, and smelling, and grosser than that are the 5 active senses, procreating, excreting, walking, locomotion, that kind of thing. And all those 5s are different 5s at different levels of consciousness. But what you forgot to do, or what you forgot when you got embodied, was to make sure that you knew that they were connected. If you knew they were connected, you could find your way out of that mess. See? If you forgot they were connected, here you are in the realm of the 5 elements. Your senses are different from the elements are different from each other, and you have no way of connecting them. So you're not a yogi anymore. You're not in yoga. You're in the scattered mind. And you're divorced from nature. And you're not treating nature with reverence and respect. And you can't deify anything. And it's a shame to even bow down in front of an image, you see. And the whole thing's gone to hell in a handbasket. And where's Shakti and all that, you see? So I'm describing the conundrum of the Kali Yuga, particularly in the West, the wild, wild West, you see. So becoming aware then again of the panchakarna, of the 5-fold systems, you can then have a connected the dot series inside of yourself, or a trail of breadcrumbs, I've often said, that connect you back to your true self again. Yes, go ahead, try and jump from granite to realization of the Atman. And skip all the stairs in between. I dare you. See? Come back and tell me how that worked for you. You see, good luck with that. I'll tell you. See, but if you can begin to build the pyramid, build in quintuplications, and begin to know the kingdoms of heaven within you, and know what they are and what they consist of, at what levels they are, then you can become a facile soul who can go up and down the amber stairs of birth and death without any problem. I'm quoting Sri Aurobindo. Up and down the amber stairs of birth and death without any problem. So I went a little bit longer on that particular entry But it's connected, you see, to pramana and panchakarna and all the way back up to Drauvya, the producer of substances. How does she do it? How does she make substances exist? How does she incept them? You see, where do they come from? Nobody asks that. See, oh, a black hole. Well, she's the black hole of all black holes. You see, she's black, Kali black. And she's vast. She holds all the universes within her. She's Jagadatri, holder of all the worlds. Something to think about. So, producer of substances is a very powerful arm that you can look into and go deep with. And you might as well put between all four of these arms the prana. Because prana, of course, missing link in our understanding in the West. Man does not live by bread alone means prana. But there's another energy there that's causing you to lift your hands and causing me to collect my thoughts. And if you have control of it, and you've gotten control of it by various means, not just watching your breath or becoming aware of your breath, but actually connecting with what's making you breathe, the prana itself, and you get a hold of that, well, as far as the father of yoga is concerned, you're free at that moment. Now, take off. Ride the great prana upwards, inwards, to the highest realization. If you haven't got a hold of the prana, then go away, go back to the world. You see, there's nothing I can do for you. You haven't made the first step in yoga yet. So that's what yoga wants of you, first of all. As far as a system, a philosophy, part of the astikas, is wants you to get hold of the prana. And that's only because you lost it somewhere. The realized souls come here and they come with the prana intact. They come into the womb via the prana, and they know what they're doing. And they leave the body with the prana intact, you see. So the prana is just it's like right at her navel, it's just right at the hub of creation. It's where things are formed. Talk about Drauvya. Producer of substances might as well be flesh and bone, not just water and earth and air. So, producer of substances is right there at the very middle of everything. See, everything's all around that chakra. So, to come to understand the prana and get a hold of it, get it on your side and utilize it is the number one requisite in yogic practice. Don't get stuck in hatha then, you see. Do a little, get your body in shape to sit like this for several hours without moving and go on. But get a hold of the prana, and don't do it just by breathing exercises. Find out what's making you breathe and study that. And get a hold of it. And then take it to the psychic level, because the psychic prana is next step. After the prana, there's what's called a psychic prana. And if you get there, that's where all your memories come flooding back. See? You're too attached to objects, giving away, taking them as gifts, gift giving, you see. And that makes you forget all about your past lifetimes. They say aparigraha, see, giving of gifts. Why is that a problem? Because it makes you forget about your last lifetime. You come here and you start bartering. Business, as usual. You see. So you came here as a merchant and you leave a merchant. My daddy was a lawyer, his daddy was a lawyer, and I'm a lawyer. See? And I don't trust a family that has many lawyers in it. See? That's what Vivekananda said. So, don't follow the pale of everyone else, you see. Try for a little originality. Try and get a hold of something that other people don't have. Prana would be a good starting point. Everyone is living in pallid imitation of everyone else. So, prana is there. We missed Shraddha quickly, right at the heart. That's, of course, faith. I was looking for that in terms of Shatsampat, because it is the fifth of the six jewels. The sixth of the six jewels. It's Shraddha, faith. So faith is definitely enjoined upon the aspirant. Now here, as a part of her lay that flows down around her, very long, beautiful garland she has, which is an eternal garland which never wilts, they say, is kripa, grace, and sadhana, self-effort. They're a perfect twin. Some people are thinking, I want grace. Other people are thinking, I'm going to do sadhana. And really they're the same thing. Her arms have dictated that they're the two wings of the bird. Is that you want to do sadhana because she's already granted you her grace. Otherwise you wouldn't be thinking about sadhana at all. You might have noticed, nobody does sadhana. Nobody wants to do it. They want money, they want fame, they want power, they want pleasure, they want objects. They want hatha and pranayam. See, whatever, even if they go into spiritual life, they want the wrong things. But to actually want to do tapas, to do the practice, to make oneself strong, to make oneself resolute, to make oneself determinate, not indeterminate, decisive, not indecisive, is to take a strong step towards spiritual freedom. See, nishchayatma. So that's what this great faith leads to, and it leads to a true desire for liberation. Now that's pretty much this top of the chart on up, with a few additions that have been put in, which you'll see next week. From here on down, well, of course, don't forget her feet, Devi Padam. See, because her feet of bliss, souls go for that. And actually, I didn't really finish talking about kripa and sadhana either, but they are the two wings of the bird, grace and self-effort. They go together. If you're waiting for grace, then probably you should do some self-effort, and then she'll grant you her grace. If you're just relying on self-effort, then you should probably say, she gave me the will to do self-effort by her grace. See? And put the two together, because they are two wings of a bird. My teachers used to say that all the time, every day when he talked, two wings of the bird. And so there, at the foundation of that is taking refuge at her feet, Devi Padam. Now from here on down you have, as this is a quick tour, and we're coming to the end of our time, the Trinity is a good place to put them right here, with this trikona, it's a triangle, of direction going down into the worlds. That is all of this power and all of this glory and all of this potential and all of this consciousness at different stages of consciousness and intelligence are flowing down into Prakriti, down into nature. And the Trinity stands at the hub of that. I have another chart I can show you that explains that better, but I'll reserve it for that particular teaching when we come to it and isolate it. But right there is really sort of the inception of Maya. Maya is one of the spandas, or vibratory spheres, in the Shaivite system, Kashmiri Shaivism. One of the very high spheres, and when it kicks in, then name, form, time, space, and cause and effect kick in. And they kick in at different levels of subtlety, all the way down to a very gross level, which you find here, people answering to their karmas. You reap what you sow kind of idea. And that's all at the behest of Maya, but the idea, that the teaching given about Maya is that it's insentient. It's not like a devil out to get you, like say in the fundamentalist Christian tradition. It's insentient. It's like that pond scum, you see, that comes dancing up over the lake when you part it with your hands. It's natural just to cover and to obscure and to distort. It's like the Gunas, see? And so it just comes dancing back naturally. So with sadhana, the soul keeps it clear. Shankara said, I want to keep my mind polished every day like a mirror so that I can see the reflection of God without any distortions in it. And that's why he did sadhana every day, even though he didn't need to do sadhana anymore, and also to be example to others to do sadhana. So those are the two reasons he gave when he was asked why he still did worship and sadhana. So there, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva have to deal with this Maya. Here's Mahamaya, and there's her Maya. See, and that's at the very foundation of her pillar there that she's sitting on, her great seat, the great throne. And so Maya is coming manifested, and at first it goes through a period of unmanifested Prakriti. That's where everything is that is going to be in form is held back in formless state. I often say your baby came from a formless state and your great-grandfather went back into a formless state. So there's a cycling going on right at that level here at this yoni. It's a womb. This is really the Shiva Lingam sits in it usually. And this represents the yoni, or the womb of all things. So unmanifested Prakriti would be that part of the womb where everything is in inception or in potential and hasn't yet spilled out into form. You see, it's in the inception idea still. In the 4 phases of the word, there's a phase of the word which is called madhyama, which is kind of middling, where everything like meaning, form, objects, and word, the word that's going to be assigned to the object, are all sort of in an indeterminate state. And then they're all going to be cohesed together, and that's going to turn into an object at the Vaikari state, at the rudimentary state. That's this state. See, everything is turned into an object. But before it was an object, it had to have a meaning, it had to have a name, it had to have an intelligence in it of some kind. And that was all disconnected. You see, so that's sort of like a description of unmanifested Prakriti. Everything is there. Everything that has ever been in form, everything that will come into form, is there in an indestructible way. See, where is it? Ajati-Vada. It was never born, it never died. It was never created, it was never destroyed. So that's the explanation of birthless, deathless state at every level behind Indian philosophy, explained very nicely by unmanifested Prakriti. Krishna goes into it in the Gita. He says, here's my manifested nature. It's called threefold mind and 5 elements. That's my manifested form. Beyond that is my unmanifested form. That's where everything has been held in abeyance. It's formless. Everything went into a formless state. But beyond that unmanifested form is my supremely unmanifested form called Ishvara. See? And that is my true nature, Purusha, the supreme Purusha. So Purusha and Prakriti have always been playing together. It's like saying spirit and nature, or the God and mankind. As far as mankind's dravya is concerned, his bodies, his flesh, his elements, even his thoughts to a great degree, they've been playing all the time, like oil and water, you see, that don't really mix. They only mix for a little while and then they have to come apart again. So like that, in the unmanifested Prakriti stage, there's this idea of mixing going on. Consciousness is going to mix with form, Maya, and it will equal the worlds of name and form and time and space, and it will give rise to lust, anger, greed, envy, jealousy, fear, pride, shame, pride of caste, pride of lineage, you see, dull mind, scattered mind. It'll give rise to everything possible under the sun. It will come right out of unmanifested Prakriti and manifest itself right in your face. See? Staring you in the face, including all your karmas. That's nimitta, you see, cause and effect. It's karma. So that's where everything gets dicey, you see. You work your way back up to the Trinity, salute them and say, let me go beyond you, and go back to the Great Mother. Oh Brahma, Lord Brahma, you have such a beautiful sattvic world. I've seen what it can do. I want out of it. I stayed in the bath too long. I got wrinkled. You see, old age again and again and again. Birth, death, birth, growth, disease, old age, decay, and death again and again and again. So finally I got world weary. And when I got world weary, I wanted out. So I started using Viveka Vairagya and so forth, or ecstatic worship, to get myself up and out of that suffering and eliminate the pain that I felt and get myself free. Because free is what I am. You see, freedom are us. Now, unmanifested Prakriti and the 24 cosmic principles. You want me to go through them all for you again? We've gone through them so much. And my continued suggestion is that you meditate on them after you memorize them. 5 senses, 5 elements, and 5 tanmatras, and fourfold mind, and so forth. We'll look at that as its own teaching, but that's all unmanifested. When it manifests, then you get this lower end of the panchakarna. Pancha means 5, karna means cause. So there's a 5-fold cause to everything. And this is all spilling down out of consciousness. And as it does, consciousness, intelligence, and thoughts get grosser and grosser and grosser. Finally, they formulate objects. The object's secret is that it came from a thought in your mind. But you don't know that. Holy Mother used to tell us that all the time. She'd say, "But objects are just your thought made concretized. Don't you know that?" And we were hanging out in some idea that, it got formed by nature, by coincidence, or by a big bang or something. But the whole thing got projected from your mind. And your mind gets projected from the great mind, Lord Brahma. And that mind is in Mother. And she's overseeing it. The Trinity is hers. Projection, sustenance, and withdrawal is hers. See? That's a tempest in a teacup. She's holding in her arm, her hands. This one's called projection, and this one's called withdrawal. And creation, preservation, and destruction are going on there inside them. She's just laughing at it. See? Oh, look at that. All those souls think it's real. But they don't know their true nature yet. And when they do, they'll return to me. There's a song in India that says, "The Mother of the Universe winked at me and sent me down to earth." She said, "Go down there and play." But she winked at me. And the wink means, don't forget where you came from. See? Don't forget who you are. That your true nature is divine, not material. See? Don't fall into Maya's domain and then forget yourself and get lost. So everything from manifested Prakriti and the panchakarna down to the pancha indriyas, those are your 5 senses, and the panchabhutas, air, earth, fire, water, and ether. And here, some strewn around the worship area, you see, because all of this really should be a matter of worship. If you come here, you should be worshiping things. You should be deifying them so that you don't fall into the misconception that they're that you can own them, or that they're going to fulfill you, or that they won't get stolen or broken or decay or everything else that happens here. You want to make sure you stay free of that. So I had some fun with some of these puja effects. The shabda, sound from the bell, the pot, space inside of it, as akasha, or the 5 akashas. I'll show you the 5 little Russian dolls chart when we get there. Vidya is knowledge coming from this 5-flame lamp that you use at worship. Anam is food that's being offered to the Devi. And all these flowers that have been strewn about are the lokas, all the different worlds that are at her feet. Lokas means worlds. This is one loka here called Bhutakasha, and it has millions of worlds in it, doesn't it? So that's just in the physical world. But now if you go inside to the ancestor world, does heaven just one world? Or does it also have millions and millions of spaces in it? Planets, as it were, subtle planets, dream planets, where the ancestors are collecting, see, and having commerce with each other. So these lokas are each, a loka doesn't just mean one world and then one world and then one world. It means realms of worlds, just like outer space is here, only on much subtler levels. When Christ saw that, he said, "My Father's mansion has many chambers." That's all he could say. My God. My father's mansion has many chambers. What else can I say? He was thrown into jhana samadhi. He sat under the tree and just looked inside of himself, and jhana means stunned. So he was in a kind of stunned state. So long he sat there that grains fell in his hair and birds pecked them, lit on his head and pecked them out of his hair. See, he was it's like Buddha under the bo tree for 49 days. He was in that same state. And that's because he saw the kingdoms of heaven within him, and probably other mysteries even deeper and more wonderful. So these lokas, or flowers, are all these different worlds that fall at her feet that she oversees. Now, anything I left out, yagya, the smoke coming off this ghee lamp, you see, from the clarified butter is called yagya. Yagya means sacrifice. You do it to the gods. So when you burn anything in a homa fire, the idea is that the smoke from the burnt offerings, turns into a smoke, and that permeates the ether. But it doesn't just permeate the physical ether for you to smell and for you to enjoy, but it permeates all the other ethers that are laying inside of it, like 5 little Russian dolls. And so the gods are in one of those ethers, and they're receiving the essence of the burnt offerings that are offered by your heartfelt devotion. You see, this falls more on the side of prema bhakti. So this yagya is going on. There are actually 5 great yagyas that we should do, to mankind, to the ancestors, to the gods and goddesses, to the rishis and seers, and to the animals and insects and so forth. So you've got these 5 great yagyas you're doing all the time. That's why I say when you come here, you should be worshiping. You see, you should be doing yagya, and you should enter into it with faith and the willingness to sacrifice yourself. So this burnt offering smoke, that's what this means with sacrifice. You should always be doing sacrifice here. Krishna says in the Gita, this world is not for the one who does no sacrificing. So then how can the next world be for that one either? See? This world is not for the one who does not give in sacrifice. So the next world will not accept him either if he doesn't give sacrifice here. So that's why I say here you do worship, you do sacrifice, you surrender, sharanagata, you surrender yourself in that. The only other thing is these Shatsampat, which I already told you, the 6 jewels, and the Putter Shartas. These are her gift to ordinary human beings, of which there are a lot. You see. Purusharthas means the 4 fruits. So first, dharma, get the teachings from a teacher. Second, artha, get right livelihood. Third, kama, fulfill your desires in the dharma. And fourth, moksha, get freedom, which is back to this entry up here, moksha or mukti. Those are called the 4 fruits of life, and they're one of the most ancient teachings of Divine Mother Wisdom. It's one of the teachings in India that's specifically allocated to her. She gives her devotees the 4 fruits of life: dharma, kama, artha, and moksha. So that's at the root of this outer pillar for all beings who are aspiring to get into higher realization of her. Can you see anything on there that I didn't cover in this grand tour? Huh? Ah, of course. Kundalini Shakti, which I'm falling more on the Prema Bhakti side, but it's really more of the most mystical philosophy in India. All the great seers talk about it. Sri Ramakrishna even went so far as to say that no spiritual growth can happen without the awakening of Kundalini Shakti. So Kundalini Shakti is the Devi. That's like, what prana is to your body, Kundalini Shakti is to her spiritual body. That is the energy that courses through her. Pure Kundalini. There's no word really other than Shakti to describe it. Intelligence, non-duality, consciousness, pure awareness, However, if you get into a study of Kundalini Shakti and its chakras, when we get here in this series of 6 classes that are coming up, I will show you 2 or 3 charts from the Kundalini Shakti collection, and we will see just how deep that system goes. Basically, it's based on the 7 chakras, and that's one of the main facets of the teaching. Muladhara at the base, and then Svadhisthana, Manipura, and then Anahata, we call it heart chakra, throat chakra, third eye chakra, and the crown chakra, they call it. So Kundalini Shakti has to march up, or in, better say in, these 7 centers to introduce the aspiring soul to its true nature. So that's something we can look at. It's a very powerful system that has to be included in mother tradition. So as darkness, wind, and rain is starting to return after our big rain this morning, I think I will let you out a little early, 10 minutes early or so, and we have made a good inroad into the Shakta-Advaita-Vada. You can see how comprehensive it is, how much is in it, the non-dual path of the Divine Mother, and that it's a lot more than just a word like non-duality. It's not sterile at all. It's full. Purnamadaha, Purnamidam, Purnat Purnamadachite. It's full, full, full. Everything is full about it. And that's to be celebrated. So that's what we will be trying to do in the next 6 classes and the next 6 Sundays here in the Hawaii SRV Center. So here, let's end with a chant, and then we can retire to prasad dinner. Om Sato Ma Sadgamoya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamoya Mrichorma Amritam Gamaya Abira Bira Mayeti Rudrayate Dakshinamukam Tenamam Pahinicham Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from darkness to light, from lower truth to higher truth, from the unreal to the real, and from the illusion of death to eternal life. Reach us through and through, O Lord and Mother, with thy sweet and benign presence. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.
Kali Bol Mahadevi, Kali Bol Mahamaya, Kali Bol Mahashakti, Kali Bol.
Kali Bol Ram Krishna 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 Kali Bol Ram Krishna Kali Bol Ram Krishna Kali Bol.
Kali Bol Ram Krishna Kali Bol Ram Krishna Kali Bol Ram Krishna Kali Bol.
Kali Bol Mahadevi Kali Bol Mahamaya Kali Bol Mahashakti Kali Bol.
Kali Bol Mahadevi, Kali Bol Mahamaya, Kali Bol Mahashakti, Kali Bol.
Kali Bol Ram Krishna Kali Bol.
Kali Bol Ram Krishna Kali Bol.
Kali Bol Ram Krishna Kali Bol.